What's up everyone, Alex here. I just recently spent a total of 3.5 hours playing the Octopath Traveler 2 demo, and I just want to share my first impressions of this incredible upcoming game. Given that a lot of people were talking about Agnia and Thronei as their starting protagonists, I kind of wanted to have a very different starting point than everyone else. So I chose Particio because I felt his job being a merchant could turn into something very interesting in the long term. And very quickly, I immediately fell in love with this character. His scenario basically starts in this mining colony that started because of the boom in silver ore. And over time, greed basically sets in, and somehow the townsfolk lost the deed to their homes because of a greedy landowner. I won't spoil the identity of who the landowner is, but this is a trope that I saw coming from the very beginning. That being said, being in this Western environment kind of reminded me of Team Asano's work in Live Alive, which was released last year, which also had a Western-themed environment. I'd like to think that whatever they learned in Live Alive are things that they applied to this specific game, and immediately, right from the get-go, when the town is actually being built up, it kind of showed how much the graphics improved over the first game. Now, I recently started playing the Octopath Traveler mobile game, which is really good by its own right, but given how that specific game is built off of familiar assets from the first game and then going into this one, I really could see a level of clarity that the developers knew that they wanted to impart in this game. If you played Octopath Traveler 1, then you know that these first chapters essentially go over that specific character's story, and then off in the world you go. Particio's, of course, is no exception, and you'll basically be fighting the greedy landowner's henchmen quite often in Particio's storyline. This is, of course, how you get a taste of the combat. The combat in Octopath Traveler 2 is pretty much like Octopath Traveler 1, save for 3 brand new features, which is the latent power, the ability to speed up combat, and the ability to change the time of day. I'll go over that later part very shortly. The latent power is kind of like this super meter that kind of builds up over time during battle, which activates a very powerful skill for that specific character. I think Particio's is my favorite because his latent power actually fills up his entire stock of BP. BP is actually the currency that you use in order to get extra hits during a particular turn. This functions almost similarly to something like the Bravely system in Bravely Default, but this has more to do with the shield system, which actually prevents significant damage from being dealt onto specific enemies. So for instance, if an enemy has 2 shield, you have to figure out what weapons or attacks they're weak to, and if you manage to nail their weakness, you'll diminish their shields and then they'll be stunned, preventing them from acting out in the next turn. The break system and the BP system are always something that I absolutely love about Octopath. And yes, it has some similarities with Bravely Default, but being able to break characters is just satisfying to me. In Octopath Traveler 1, you grinded quite a bit, and not being able to speed up battle just kind of artificially prolonged your gameplay. That said, the next thing that I want to talk about is super important. New to Octopath Traveler 2 is the ability to change the time of day, from day to night and back to back. This is an important thing to note because in addition to increasing the random encounters by running, by changing the time of day, you're making the enemies you encounter more powerful in the evening, and thusly yielding more experience. It's of my belief that there are 2 kinds of JRPG players: people who love grinding and people who want to use strategy in order to get rewards. And I think this solution is quite elegant and allows people more flexibility and control of how they can experience the game. I've already waxed poetic about how beautiful the town of Or's Rush is, so I have to also bring up the music, which again, it's one of my favorite parts of Octopath Traveler 1, and they completely nailed it in Octopath Traveler 2. I just want to bring attention to Particio's particular theme, which is just oozing with amazing saxophone melodies. I don't normally point out specific instruments when it comes to soundtracks, but it's just so emotional and it's just so noticeable in the best ways possible that I just want to highlight it right now. When I headed out to try and recruit Agnia, just seeing the change of the environment and the music just felt truly magical. Like, this western town is so different than Agnia's agricultural-based town. I mean, the name of the town is a dead giveaway already. It's Cropdale, for crying out loud. In both of their path actions, which are very unique abilities specific to each character, they both have the ability to convince people to tag along with them. Agnia's negotiation tactics also have a risk of ruining your reputation in town, and that just seems wrong if you fail that somehow. Whereas Particio, you just pay money and there you go, you basically recruit them. Now you're probably wondering yourself, especially if you're picking out characters on the world map, why the heck am I going to care to recruit characters? In Particio's scenario, when I actually recruited Joe, what was really incredible about this is that Joe has no HP. So for a set number of turns during battle, he has a chance to pretty much absorb damage and deal damage and give out buffs as well. And every single time Joe is in my party, he dealt so much damage that I was just thinking to myself when I was leaving Or's Rush, I think I have to get Joe every single time because he's that good. But what's interesting is that depending on who recruits each character, the perks are going to be different. So when I actually got into a battle with Joe summoned, he basically gave me this really incredible buff, and I just remembered that I recruited him using Agnia, and I was just floored. This guy is incredible. I played other games recently that have the ability for you to build your relationship with them and have them be a part of your party as a permanent character. But I think the way that Octopath Traveler 2 does it here, which is kind of like a weird version of a Final Fantasy summon, but less powerful, is kind of a unique gimmick that I absolutely wholeheartedly embrace. Going back to Agnia though, when I played her scenario, I definitely felt like I had a harder time with that specific story beat, especially when I fought the actual big bad of her story. But that only really helped propel the narrative forward, and I appreciated the events that followed that. And when I saw the full breadth of Agnia's story, I just fell in love with her right away. The last scenario that I got to experience was Hikari's, and I have to point out again how varied these three characters' areas are. And then you go to Hikari's, where it's just completely desert, which is a different vibe than the other two. It kind of reminds me of the Mongols, but leaning more towards a Japanese aesthetic. That opening scene in his first chapter where you're looking out into the distance and you see this awesome castle, this awesome fort, kind of reminded me again of Live Alive, where you're trying to infiltrate this castle in the middle of the night, and it's just quite a contrast between those two environments. As other chapter 1s, there's a very interesting story that's happening with Hikari, where his kindness and generosity is the perfect foil to his more violent brother who wants to be the king of this realm. Unfortunately, this is where the demo stopped for me, but not after realizing that the clock had been stopped for about, according to my video capture, 38 minutes, which is very generous of them. But overall, when I think about like my 3.5 hour experience with Octopath Traveler 2, there are still many questions that I want answered. But what I will say about my experience with Octopath Traveler 2's demo is that I absolutely love the three characters that I got. Yes, I probably have to spend more time trying to understand how to fully utilize Agnia's toolkit, but I love her story, and I know that Octopath Traveler 2 is going to pay it off big time. And I absolutely love the voice acting too. Not to put too much of a fine point to it, but I play a lot of these games with English voice acting. And the accent that Particio has, it's so bad. Like the southern accents in this game are so bad that it's so good in the process. It's kind of like this loop that just kind of went back in and of itself for me. It kind of improves the vibe and the fantasy of the world, if you will. The way that I'm approaching Octopath Traveler 2 is that it's going to be an imperfect world because of a lot of the things that are happening to each of the individual characters. And while not every story is wholesome like Agnia's, it's definitely ignited a curiosity in me that I remember having when playing through the first Octopath Traveler. It also helps that the battle system is just as solid as it was before, with some well thought out changes, which is, in my opinion, going to help out the experience of the pacing of the game. On that note, the Octopath Traveler 2 demo is out now on all the available platforms that it's coming out on, and it has a 3-hour time limit per save, and you only get one save per playthrough, which basically means that you can play it as much as you want for 3 hours. If you want to speedrun it to try to get all the characters, good luck with that. But right after you hit the 3-hour mark, or sometime after that, it's going to stop the game and basically say, hey, we're going to save the game for you. You can carry on once you get the full game, which is something similar to what they did in the first Octopath Traveler. At any rate, I want to hear what you think of the demo. Which character did you start with, and which other characters did you pick up afterwards, and why? Post your thoughts in the comments below and let's talk about it. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.